Welcome to your video representation video tutorial on audio files in your Final Cut Pro project part 2. Here we'll talk about a couple of slightly more advanced techniques that can help you make fine-tuned adjustments in your audio for your project. You remember that in the previous edition I wanted to eliminate the diegetic sound from my picking practice clip, but keep the diegetic sound in the hoeing practice clip and render the background music to a very subtle level. That subtle level will be entirely too low for the picking practice segment. You can see it's quite low here and almost so soft as to be mostly inaudible. I need that level higher here under picking practice, but lower here under hoeing practice. I can do that by using what we call keyframes. And I'll start by placing the playhead here in the timeline where I want the edit, that shift in sound, to happen. Once I've placed the playhead, I will double click on my sound clip and then go here to the viewer. You can see that the ins and outs are marked here. That marks the beginning and end of the sound that's actually in my timeline. And the playhead that you see here in the viewer represents the playhead that you see here. So this point in the sound clip in the viewer is also this point in the sound clip in the timeline. At this point I can use the tool that is called keyframes to put hinges on this otherwise inflexible sound level bar. You remember that if I grab and drag this bar, it moves only as a straight line. Well, negative 15 decibels was a good setting for the hoeing practice clip. I need it significantly higher, probably up around the 0 decibel mark in the picking practice segment. I can get it there by selecting my pen tool here in the tool palette. I can also simply press P. Going to my sound bar and placing keyframes. These are small dots. They may be hard to see, but they're small dots that act as hinges on your sound line adjuster bar. Once I've placed those dots, I can grab them, the keyframes themselves. You see when I hover over, I get a small crosshair. I can grab a keyframe and drag it. I'm going to drag this up to about 0 decibels. Probably a good sound level for underneath my picking practice clip. You can see now I've segmented this line. Instead of being locked in a straight line, it hinges here at the first keyframe and here again at the second keyframe. That sound will have changed here, and we can check it by muting the hoeing practice sound, the diegetic sound, and listening and watching for just the sound in tracks 3 and 4. You see here it's quite low and then gradually rises to a much higher level underneath picking practice. We can make these same changes directly in the timeline. They're less precise but sometimes more handy to do. So I will zoom in just slightly to get a better view on the changes we want to make. I will reset these changes by clearing my keyframes. I can right click on a keyframe and clear to delete it. Then in order to get that same pink line so we can make those changes here in the timeline, I go to this icon. It's the toggle clip overlays selection tool. I click it and voila, the pink lines appear here. This pink line is exactly the same as that pink line. And any changes I make here are also made up there in the viewer. You can watch as I drag it down. It moves. I remember negative 15 was the right sound level for hoeing practice. I want it higher under picking practice. I get my pen tool, set keyframes in about the right places, grab the keyframe, drag it up to 0 decibels, and test. and it makes the jump. Now if you want a more sudden or more gradual transition, you can simply drag the keyframes apart. If you want to taper the sound back down again, you simply add more keyframes and adjust. You can add as many keyframes as you want to do all kinds of drastic things to the sound in your music. The final thing I want to show you is basic audio transitions. The basic audio transitions are fade in and fade out. And like all transitions, they happen up here. Excuse me a moment. They happen up here in the Effects tab. I can click Effects, Audio Transitions, and you'll see the crossfades. Crossfade 0 decibels, crossfade plus 3 decibels. The difference is crossfade 0 decibels is the fade out. It brings you down to 0 decibels. The crossfade plus 3 decibels brings you up from nothing into the sound level at which you have the sound in the clip set. Here I'm ending the clip, so I will grab my crossfade 0 decibel, position it as I like. I can see that my sound level is still quite low. I'll drag that up a bit, something more reasonable. You'll see that this is asking to be rendered. We've made a change to that music file I had to render earlier, so I'll simply render that. Transition, render all, both. It's rendered. And I can make adjustments. I can change the duration of this clip, this transition rather. We'll make it a little longer to dramatize the effect. Again, I made a change, so it needs to be rendered. And we'll test it. As you can see, the music faded out to nothing. Those are a couple more basic but very important tools for using sound in your Final Cut Pro project. I hope it's helpful. Get cracking.